Hi, my name is Stacey Bell Lynn. I spent 20 years working in local news, and 13 years ago, I married an NFL player turned coach, Anthony Lynn, and joined the world of NFL Superwives. I've always loved hearing about the life behind the headlines. It's where you find the common thread that connects us. That's what I want to do here. My husband played and coached for the Broncos and 49ers. He's currently the running backs coordinator for the Commanders. We've moved 6 times across the country for his various jobs. When I first met my husband, I didn't know anything about football. I just loved the commercials and the snacks. Well, trust me, that's changed. In my new NFL world, the wives became my family and confidants. It is a sisterhood that transcends teams and rivalries. In each episode, I'll talk with a significant other of a player or coach, the football wives who hold it all together. We'll get real and give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of it all. This is the world that I want to share with you. Welcome to Superwives of the NFL, their inside stories. Let's kick it off. Hi, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Superwives of the NFL. Today we have Babette Perry. I like to say Babette Perry Pitts. So it's you have so much going on. You're an NFL wife. Your husband was in the NFL. Your father-in-law was an NFL legend. Your sons played college football. You're a very successful agent. Just so many titles and so many hats. Thank you for joining me today.
It's really exciting to be with you. I'm thrilled to be a part of this, as you probably can imagine, and I'm so proud of all of your accomplishments as well.
Wow, and I want to do the backstory on how we met. I'm going to punch up my audio just a little bit here, but we met years ago. Anthony was coaching for the Chargers, and we had done, I think it was Hard Knocks, and he did the barbecue segment. Mm-hmm. And you reach out about representing him for some other, endeavor shows, and he said, well, I'm a little busy right now, with the Chargers, but you should meet my wife. And so it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, no, that was really what was happening is, I felt very passionate about working with athletes and coaches, but one of the things that I thought was being neglected was the coaches in the NFL. And I felt like there were so many really distinct personalities that could have a huge impact on the broadcasting world. And Anthony just stood out for me as a man of integrity and values, but most importantly, he was so authentic and really likable. So he got my attention. But that's right, I was calling him and I was so excited to get him on the phone. And then he's like, you know what, I'm really busy right now, but you probably should meet my wife. And so at that moment, I'm like, I'm looking you up, and I'm like looking you up, and like, you never know, right?
Right,
so
right.
I'm looking at you, I'm like, oh my God, she's really a fabulous broadcaster. So I was super excited to meet you. So it worked out really well.
And that honestly, I think that was right around the time that COVID hit. So that's been about 4.5, 5 years ago.
That's crazy. It went by that fast.
It really did. So, okay, tell me let's start with your father-in-law. Okay. Legendary player for the Buffalo Bills. Or no, was it Green Bay?
Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
So Elijah Pitts played in the first 4, I guess you would say the first 2 Super Bowls and then the 2 championship games, because there were championship games before there were Super Bowls. And Vince Lombardi found him from, it was interesting. I just recently found out that he was at an all-black school, Philander Smith, but I didn't realize he was also picked up before that by Michigan State. And I never knew this story, and I found this out at the Hall of Fame when he was inducted into the HBCU Hall of Fame. And it was there that I found out that he was invited to play with Michigan State, which was a big school, but they told him he could only play in certain games, and he would be limited to just a few games because they didn't allow black players to play in all the games. So that's how he went to Philander Smith. And from there, he set records. I think he made the first rushing touchdown in the Super Bowl, and from there he went to different coaching opportunities, and he ended up coaching four Super Bowls with the Buffalo Bills. And when Marv Levy was ill, he was an interim head coach for 3 big games. And it was really funny because my family's super, super quiet about everything. They're, I'm like, I'll talk to 500 people in an elevator and know their whole life story. But
exactly.
my family is just completely like, everything's confidential. Like HBO one time walked into the house and they're doing an interview and I'm like, what's going on here? They're like, we just didn't want to make a big deal and this, that, and the other. I'm like, well, it kind of is a big deal. They come into your house and they're doing an interview with your husband and your father-in-law. But that's my life. So I was having really important meetings in New York City with the heads of all the sports organizations and all the heads of the networks. And I'm at breakfast and everyone keeps congratulating me. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I have no idea what's going on. And I'm looking at the New York Times sports page and there's my father-in-law front and center. And I said to Ronnie, I said, is there something you want to tell me? And he goes, no, why? And I go, is something going on with your dad? He goes, I don't know. And I go, yeah, I think there is, because in every meeting people keep congratulating me, and he's the interim head coach for the Bills, and that was a really big deal for him, but also a surprise for me at the same time, because that's how they roll.
There's so much to unpack here, so we're gonna put a pin in that. We'll talk. Okay. We'll come back to Ron, who also played and is now a commentator. But you, at the same time, were a very successful television news agent who represented people like, tell me some of your clients that you represented, because very impressive.
So my background is, one of the things that I really admire about Ron is, when we started dating, we dated in college, and then he got drafted to Buffalo, and he was really focusing on his career. And one thing I realized pretty quickly is that I could not compete with the pigskin. I could not compete with that. I require a lot of attention, and that was just not going to fly. So the long story, he has to be focused and disciplined, and I learned pretty quickly that I need to focus on my career. And I was one of the few women during that time that was able to do that, because most of the women had to go, they had families, and they had, whenever the husband moved, they had to move, and they had to go wherever their husband was. And Ron and I were not married at the time, but I would work till midnight every day, because I knew I wasn't going to go out and I wasn't going to hang out at parties and stuff. So, and at that time we didn't have cell phones. So he would call me, when he called, I better be at that phone because I was going to miss that phone call. And he had limited time too with practice and what have you. But I honestly don't believe I would have had the career that I have today had I been not dating Ron, because 100,000% of the energy that I had was devoted to my career while he was devoting his life to his career. And I was a young assistant at the William Morris Agency, is where I trained.
And I want to pause right there and say William Morris Agency, which is a big time agency. Like you are a big deal.
Well, I thought I was a pretty important person as an assistant, because at that time the assistants had a lot of power. They're the ones who could determine who gets on that phone call and who doesn't. Mm-hmm. And then what happened is my boss and I started a company, and out of my department came Tom Bergeron, Phil Kogan, Matt Lauer, Greg Kinnear. I developed what was very unique in that I took all these news anchors and developed them for Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood. So Julie Moran was the first woman to host Wide World of Sports, and then from there she did Inside Stuff, and then from there we did Entertainment Tonight. I helped a lot of women develop themselves from like producers or, anchors and reporters. So it was, Inside Edition, Nancy Glass, it was Access Hollywood, it was Giselle Fernandez. It was, as I said, they had news shows that were, Arthel Neville was like the first African-American female to host an entertainment show, mm-hmm. and that was Extra. And so it was like the business had just launched about the unscripted world, and that was the world that I focused on. And I was just in the right place at the right time, because Breakfast Time was a show that, was where Jeff Probst was developed, and Tom Bergeron and Phil Kogan and Lori Hibbard, Gelman's wife. And so I was just on the ground floor of every cable network, like E! Entertainment, where we did Talk Soup with Greg Kinnear, that led him to a movie career. So timing was everything.
And wait, and you were doing all of this, and you are at this point dating or married to an NFL player, and then you had. I always think Lee and Shay are twins, but they're not, are they?
Well, they really are twins. They weren't
Okay.
born twins, but they morphed into twins. What happened is they're 16 months apart. I dressed them exactly the same, and Macy's started sending me like twin discounts because I would buy two of the same things every single time. But I have to share with you a really funny story because I was trying to be creative when I was at William Morris, and I was trying to be like ahead of the curve. So what I did was when Ronnie was, when he was signed to the Bills, I sent out videotapes to all the moms of the players in their hometown to record their hometown newscast, and that's how I signed clients. So I was trying to be
whoa, back up. Say that again. That is so creative.
I thought it was pretty creative as well, but I basically sent VHS tapes to all the guys that played for the Bills' moms, and I had them record their newscast and then send it back to my office. And that's how
you found talent, news anchors, and
yeah.
That is so creative.
I know. I mean, when I say I know, I just think it's funny, but it was creative.
So, okay, you're married, you've got this great career, you have boys.
Yes.
Which I say twin boys, but they're not. How do you juggle and manage all of that? And then I think the beautiful thing is you guys have kept your marriage intact, which doesn't always work after people stop playing, and you've raised wonderful children. I know it's a broad question, but how do you manage to be good at all of these things while juggling so many balls?
I want to say that I call myself not a working mom, but a mom that works. I really felt very strongly about being a mom first by, I was volunteering at the school. I would go to the baseball games with my cell phone and my BlackBerry, and, I would get it done somehow, some way. But I think a lot of it has to do with Ron. Ron really allowed me to have the career that I wanted, that make me happy, because I really wanted to have a career, and I also wanted to be a mom, and we figured out a way, we have the same integrity, same values, but we have everything else different. Like everything about Ron and I are completely opposite. When you think about, we have different religions, different races, we come from different backgrounds, but what we have that's exactly the same is the integrity and the value system. And I really believe that is probably the only thing you need, and love, right? Love. You have to really love someone to go through some of the things that we all go through. You literally, I just want to share with you that the first day that I stepped on an NFL field, I had come from Los Angeles, and the first thing that happened was the wives were really I don't want to say mean, but they had a bit of an attitude like, are you a wife or are you a girlfriend? Because if I was a wife, it's okay. But if I'm a girlfriend, I'm going to flirt with her husband or something. It was like one of the girls was really rough on me. I said, look, let's just stop right here. I go, I've been with my boyfriend longer than all of you have been married, divorced, and remarried again. So let's just put that down there right now. And at that moment, you had to earn their respect. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, you have to remember, my husband was drafted by the Buffalo Bills, where his dad was a coach. So my mother-in-law was really good friends, really close with the general manager's wife and the head coach's wife, and they're all like this little sorority. And then I walk in, and I am a coach's, not daughter-in-law yet, but I'm also like the girlfriend of Ron. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure who, and by the way, the wives were about my same age. Many of them were not that older than me. So I felt like I had more in common with the coaches' wives, but then I knew that was not cool. And then I needed to really develop a relationship with the players' wives. But that was a really interesting situation.
But you know what? And I will say too, I remember having friends with the Jets who they would tell me I have more in common with the coaches' wives than I do the players' wives. And it was, not necessarily awkward. It's just different, because I think you're kind of expected to pack up and click with the players' wives. And then I think sometimes, maybe you're a little older, maybe you've come into the business later. And one of my friends would always say, I have more in common with you guys than I do the players' wives.
I also was a little bit of a troublemaker, and so Ronnie said that some of the guys are like, can you keep your girlfriend in California? Because I would tell the girls, if your husband's not home at 2 o'clock in the morning, just change the locks. That'll just stop that right there. And so I was like this liberated little California girl coming to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and they're like, God, can you keep her at home? But I do remember, partly because I was in this very tough business where I had to really be, for women in my business during that time, it wasn't easy. There wasn't a lot of women doing what I was doing. So the long story short is I'm talking to presidents of networks, presidents of studios, like the most powerful people in Hollywood. And then all of a sudden my husband gets cut. Well, let me tell you how I handled that one. And that is just not something I would do today. I have a lot more sophistication, and I think I have a lot more finesse. But the first time he got cut, I called Coach Shula. I told you this story. I think I told you. Maybe I didn't.
No, you did tell me this, because you did tell me.
Like, I'm calling the Miami Dolphins, and I'm calling Coach Shula. He gets on the phone. I didn't think he'd ever get
And this is the Coach Shula.
This is the Coach Shula.
Okay.
And he gets on the phone, I'm crying, because I'd heard him speak to my father-in-law and talking about how great Ronnie did in his game. And then the next week he got cut. So I'm like, God, I was like, what happened? Like, can you explain? He goes, look, I'm kind of busy, I understand, but I'm going to have you talk to my son. So he put his son on the phone with me, who obviously had to go through the same thing. There's a lot to be said that when you come from a legacy family, a lot of people think that it's going to be easier, but no, it's not. You have to really prove yourself. I mean, even Ronnie in minicamp had to prove himself, like why he was there. And you have to prove yourself anyways. But sometimes people think it's easier for legacy kids, and it really is not. And so Coach Shula's son was talking to me about some of the things that they had to deal with. But yes, now I look back and it was really embarrassing, but not quite as embarrassing as when I called the general manager of another NFL team that cut my husband. So my whole thing was, you're like, you're not going to mess with me. And I'm thinking, and then I got like cussed out, and that, like, I've never in my life been cussed out like that before. And I'm like, this man just cussed me out, like the worst words you could imagine. And so I'm just sitting here and I'm all red, and I have to go to a business meeting, and I've completely lost my composure. And I just knew that there was some funky stuff going on, but most people just let it go. But like with me, I'm like, who do you think you are? You're just the general manager of an NFL team. And for me, he was on an equal playing field with the people that I did business with. But I'm not so sure I would make that call today.
Because you were accustomed to dealing with the big wigs at the networks and the talent. So now I want to talk about the NFL, the role of the NFL wife, girlfriend. How have you seen that role change or grow over the years that you've been involved in this life?
It's so interesting. I think what's fascinating is I'm in awe of these women. Like, I look up to them. I'm like, God, I wish I was still an NFL wife or girlfriend, because I just think the way they dress and how well poised they are and how gorgeous, and mostly just because they're having fun, they're going to parties, like they're taking limos to the game, and it's more like when I was in a sorority at UCLA. I mean, that's exactly what it felt like, but they're doing it as, adult girlfriends. Two things that I've noticed that's changed. One of which is we were wearing sweats and ponytails and the Packer shirts, and that was it. The girls are glammed out, so that's the difference. We were just comfortable and cold. But the girls, it doesn't matter how cold it is. Those girls are looking like models. Yes. I also think the relationships are probably different too. I think that there has been a lot of information for the women today about what pressure is put under an NFL athlete, and a lot of people think it's a very glamorous lifestyle, and it's not. It's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of stress. I remember even when Ron was coming out of, Dick Duran was his coach, and I had just gotten to Green Bay, and Coach Duran came up to me and he goes, I just want you to know, Ronnie's going to be really upset. But he did really, really well. But his perception is his reality. And if he misses one interception or if he misses one tackle, he's really hard on himself, because for a lot of guys who are not the starters, but they're the second guy in line, they can't miss a tackle and they can't miss an interception, or they're replaced. So there's no job like that. We don't have jobs like that, where if you make a mistake, we're the only ones that see it. But if they make a mistake, the whole world, the newspapers see it, the TV sees it. And I think that back in the day, there was a lot of depression and CTE and some very serious issues that were going on with a lot of the players, but they didn't know what it was. And I think that today the kids are getting they're more educated, and they have a lot more, they have a lot more control over it.
I think that's very true. There's so much more information, and I think a lot of that has to do with social media, that we're sharing information and reaching out to each other. Have you seen it change from like where more women who are wives and girlfriends now have their own careers?
Right, that is true. When I was there with Ron, there were, I think it was Heidi Kidd, John Kidd's wife, was a broadcaster. And I think there might have been one other person, but there were none. And today I really think that women are trying to have a career outside of, one very famous football player's wife came in my office one day, and she said, "I don't want to be an extension of my husband's arm." And at that point I said, then you need to change your name. Because I think the reason why, and I didn't mean to be rude about it, but the reason why people even know who you are is because of who your father is, or your husband is, rather.
Right.
And that was like a reality check, because she's like, I want my own identity. And yes, that is important, but in her particular case, she was a very visible person and had a huge, huge impact, like on the NFL world. And I go, you really can't do that, because a lot of people would take meetings for her they would call me and say, I want to go and take her out for a meeting. And I'm like, are you interested in her, or are you interested in her husband? But the reality is that that's basically, that's the story about, it's different now. People they want a career outside of, just they don't want to now, to use the quote, be an extension of their husband's arm.
And that's really hard to do once you marry into this business, this world.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about UCLA. We both, at one point, and you still do, but at one point I was also heavily invested in UCLA because your sons played there.
Right. Well, Ronnie played there.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Ronnie played there, and Ron was actually one of the top DBs to come. He was won lots of awards coming out of UCLA. He was Defensive Player of the Year. He played in 2 Rose Bowls. He played in the Fiesta Bowl. He just made a big name at UCLA wearing number 47. And then it was so funny, because when Shay walked on to UCLA, and then he earned a scholarship, and then he also was given the number 47. And I remember when the coach gave it to him, Jim Mora, he goes, I have a surprise for you. And he goes into his locker room, and there it is, the number 47 jersey. And I think at the time that Shay wanted his own identity. And so the long story short is, I think Ronnie wanted him to have his own identity going to UCLA and having his own number and everything. And so when that big number 47 showed up in the locker, I think Ronnie said, look, I never liked that number. You don't have to have that number. You can have your own number. And so the long story short is that he ended up keeping the number for all those years. In fact, it was longer than 4 years. I think he was there for 6 years.
And so
he has like 3 degrees from UCLA right now because of COVID and because of the injuries and all this other stuff. So he's got a master's of law. He's got a master's in science, I think, of coaching, and then he's got his pre-law degree. So
that is so impressive.
Very well educated.
Yes. Now, who played overseas in Germany?
So this is kind of a fun story too, because Lee is my little real independent guy. Shay's much more like me, but Lee's exactly like Ronnie. And so Lee, he played for the University of Arizona, and he really, really loved the fact that he was playing in a D1 football program, but there was some issues with the program, and this is where the father-son thing comes in. Ron doesn't tolerate lack of integrity across the board, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, whatever it is. Ronnie felt that this was not the right environment. They had some very big, a player died and there were some problems. So long story short, he ended up going with what I thought was to UCLA, and then the coach got fired. And so he ended up going to Azusa Pacific, which was a D2 school, but a very good D2 school. That's where the Nigerian Nightmare came from. And they had really good quality coaches there. And we felt for Lee, he wanted to go somewhere where he could start and get the film. Did really, really well. And then after COVID, they got rid of the football program after 55 years. And so he had literally a week to get on a football program, literally a week. And so he went on the portal, and the first school that called him was the University of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And this kid has never been really out of California except for to Arizona, but that was it. So we dropped him off in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And of course, I'm wearing my mask because, we come from California. And everyone looks at me and they're like, why are you wearing a mask? I'm like, why are you not wearing a mask? Because at the UCLA game the day before, everybody had to wear a mask or you can't get in. In Sioux Falls, we were definitely in a different part of the country. But he got out there and he goes, oh my God. Then he was on the phone with the coaches and he was looking at a map and he's like, I don't even know where Sioux Falls is. I just said I'm going to Sioux Falls and accepted a position, but he did really, really well there. And then he was in the rookie mini camp for the 49ers. And, that was like in his mind where he was coming from, he didn't get signed, but the coaching staff there made him feel, not just him, but every single person that was in that room, he made them feel like they were a first-round draft choice. So the experience that he had, even though it was short, was the best experience of his life. Like it was, I can't tell you what happened when I heard the assistant GM call him on the phone and say, we're flying you out to the rookie mini camp. And he was literally screaming. I thought I'm on the phone having a business call and he was dying, but I've never seen him so happy in his life, because just to walk in there, and even Shanahan said to the kids, or he said, look, even to be here right now, whether you make it or not, but just to be able to walk in and be in our facility, he goes, you're always going to be a 49er. So he's a big 49er fan for the rest of his life, but he didn't get signed. He was ready to go to the XFL. Lots of different things were going on, mergers and things of that nature. So he ended up going to Poland. And my husband goes, what did we just do? I go, he's so happy. He's going to Poland and he's going to see the world. And then from there, he went to Hamburg, Germany. And to see the videos, like in Europe right now, the NFL is just fully like the most phenomenal place. Like they're wearing their Packer outfits and their 49er and their Washington and they're all the different teams. They're Buccaneers. They're just huge fans. And thousands of fans are watching them play. So not only do you get to play football, but then you get to see the world. So that was really exciting for him.
That was such a cool experience. I remember when that whole 49er thing happened, your mom is also a big 49er fan, and she had like the 49er decorated room. And so I remember you posting the video of him going over telling her that he was going to their mini camp. That was really a special experience.
Super, like I'll just cry, but it was really exciting because, even though if you don't make the team, so many kids don't get to walk into that locker room. And even for Shay, the same thing happened for him. And he had, Shay's journey has been a little bit different. Shay broke his back in high school and he had to rehabilitate himself to walk on. He walked on, made the team. He sacked the quarterback at SC, where I know, we're now rivals now. Before we were on the same team, but Ronnie had sacked the quarterback at SC at the same Coliseum, the same place that Shay did, the same Coliseum that their grandfather Elijah made the first rushing touchdown in the Super Bowl. So that Coliseum is extremely symbolic for our family, and just a beautiful, I just can't tell you, like, the excitement out of that. But then Shay did get signed to go play in the XFL, and then the merger happened and his team dissolved, and then Coach Kelly, and then later Deshaun Foster offered him a coaching job, and then he had a chance to go to the Chiefs and have an internship last year with the Chiefs, and so now he's on the coaching side. So we've got a coaching side, and then Lee now, as you know, is working for the league. So he's working for the division that hires the GMs and the news director. I say news director, there we go.
Well, that's our world. Yeah.
The head coach and the general manager. So now Lee's in New York doing, putting his MBA to use, and then Shay is coaching like his grandpa.
Well, this is why I wanted to have you on. Just such an NFL family, and just so many aspects to like your story and all of this. And you also, and I don't know necessarily if you helped, but what was it like watching your husband navigate from becoming a player and then being a commentator? Because we see a lot of the guys taking that route as well.
The thing I admire so much about Ron is while he was playing in the NFL, he was like, when he was with the Bills, he was working for the Buffalo Bills news station. Oh, it's one of the local stations in Buffalo. And then in Green Bay, he was working in a station in Green Bay. And so he was really working on his off days, Tuesdays. He would work. And then when he had his off season, he was doing high school football games and for El Segundo Cable, something we never heard about, and high school games like locally, and nothing fancy or nothing like a UCLA game, just a really, really raw high school game. And so I took his tape and I sent it to a gentleman named Dennis Swanson. Dennis was then the president. Do you know Dennis?
Dennis, yes. Dennis is one of my mentors from Fox 8 in Cleveland.
He's my mentor too, and our mentor. He's like the whole family's mentor. So Dennis literally said, I'm going to hire him. I'm like, Dennis, it's a high school football game. Because what happened was when he got cut from Green Bay, he then it looked like he was going to get signed by another team, and then somehow that didn't work. And so at that point, he's like, you know what, let me just focus on my career. And so at that moment, I sent his tape to Dennis Swanson, and Dennis hired him for ABC Sports. And I thought he was going to put him on like some junior college or something like really, really small. And then the next thing I know, he's putting him on like a huge game. And it was like broadcast news. It was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm like, boom. And then I'm like, oh my God, he's so good. Like, he's so good. I cannot believe that he's pulled this off. And so, long story short, Dennis was his mentor, gave him a huge opportunity. And then NFL, Fox started an NFL where they're going to start their new NFL network from the ground floor. And David Hill and Ed Gorin wanted to hire him. And Ronnie is like, no, I'm loyal to Dennis Swanson. Like, he took a shot on me. And by the way, Ronnie said to Fox, I'm not Ronnie Lott. I'm not Joe Montana. I'm basically not a huge name. And so I'm going to get beat out by those big names as they retire. And so David Hill said, no, we're going to make you a name. And he said no. And then they offered him a lot of good contract, guaranteed. And so I went back to ABC and I told them that, look, if you match this, he's not leaving. And they didn't. They didn't tell Dennis Swanson, by the way. And Dennis didn't find out. 10 years later, he found out that they didn't tell him. And because he would have matched the money. But the long story short, everything worked out. Ronnie worked at NFL Fox Sports for 18 years doing play-by-play. Analyst, host. He hosted primetime shows with Joe Buck, and he was on the road with John Madden and Summerall. And he was, on the A team, and you get treated very well when you're with John Madden. And so he just really flourished. And then he did entertainment shows, and he did discovery shows, and he just built this brand. And then when the kids started playing, because Ron's father didn't get to see Ronnie play a lot because of his career.
Right.
And I don't think Ronnie wanted that to happen. So when he then, ironically, another executive, Bob Cook, who was the former president of Fox Entertainment, he then became the GM of Fox in Los Angeles. and hired Ronnie to do a studio show where he's an analyst, and he's doing that now so he could be there for all of the kids' games, all their NFL, all their college games, all their high school games, and it worked out, because if not, he would have been on the road and missed everything.
You've missed so much.
Right.
Gosh, we could just talk forever. This is, Superwives of the NFL. And so we talk a lot about the sisterhood in the NFL. And you and I have talked a lot about, just the women, this phenomenal women like, the Tammy Reeds that we've met along the way. What do you think makes this NFL sisterhood so special?
I think what makes it so special, and I'm going to start with my mother-in-law, who I really haven't spent too much time talking about, which I should, because Ruth Pitts, my mother-in-law, was she gave up her whole life for her husband's career. And I mean that, moving from so many states. When people ask Ronnie where his hometown is, he can't list enough cities that he's lived in. But it really, the women behind the men are the reason why they have success. I don't believe that men can succeed without the women that have been behind them, whether it was them in high school or college when they met them or in their adult life. The sisterhood is beyond, because there's only, when you think about only 1% of 1% of a million people can really be a part of this world. The NFL is the most powerful organization in the world. There is nothing more powerful than the NFL. Every shows get canceled, things happen, environmental things happen, but at the end of the day, the one thing about the NFL is it unites us. Mm-hmm. And the one thing about the NFL is that you cheer for your favorite team, and it just bonds us as a country. So if it bonds us as a country, can you imagine what it does with us as women? And I will tell you that these women, I remember, we stuck together. Remember, I'm just the visiting person. I wasn't there full time like everyone else, but the 5 seconds I was with them, we bonded really, really well. In fact, Mary Laurie Bracken, who was married to Don Bracken, was one of my closest friends, and she died a couple years ago, and we lost her. But, she was just the most positive. She was like, how am I going to meet someone from Alabama, from Los Angeles, unless I go to an NFL team? And that's basically what happened. And we are all still very close. A lot of us speak, and we should talk more, and we should have a reunion. But I'm very connected to these women. And like I tell them, I'm part of the NFL Wives group, which I know we all are a part of this group. And a lot of women are struggling. There's a lot of tough things, but the thing that I love is how everyone is there. The bond that they have is that they all have this in common. They're married, dating, or were married to someone who played in the NFL or coached in the NFL. And that is a sorority that is unlike anything else, because it's such a very small group of people who've experienced this. But it is the one thing. It's like when you're in college and you were like a sorority girl and you bond with your sorority girls. This is another sorority, beyond anything. And it's just, everyone has experienced the same thing. Everyone has gone through the adversity. Everyone has watched the struggle, and everyone has stood to the best of their ability. Most women I know have stood there as hard as they can to help their husbands through this. And they're their biggest cheerleaders, when you think about it. But I respect that woman who had those children while their kids where their husband was playing. I respect the families and the friendships that were developed during those times, because it's unlike anything. And it's like that for coaching too. My mother-in-law, her friends, her best friends in life are the coaches' wives that she'll have for the rest of her life. And you just can't, no one has that kind of thing in common. When you work, you meet your work friends, and they're still going to be good friends. When you meet your friends from high school, they're going to be your friends from life and college. And then this is something else, because no one has really experienced the kinds of things that they have, good and bad.
I would agree with that. And it bonds you, in a way that other people can't relate to.
Right. And you think about it, because see, I say this even about college. There is so much stress out there. The guy who's starting, the backup, and the injured player. They all three are going through the same thing. The same stress. I mean, you're the starter and you screw up, you're out. You're the backup, you better be ready because anything could happen at any time. And you're stressed out about what's going to happen when I have to go out there and I can't screw up. And then when you're the injured player, you're just so stressed out because you don't know if you're ever going to be the same. And so people don't realize every person that's part of that team is the reason, like when people win Super Bowls and they go to playoff games, it's not for that one person. It's that backup, that starter, and that injured player. People forget how important that entire team is.
And I would also say too, and I know you would agree with this, when you see the organizations that fly out everyone who works in the office and the janitor and the, all of those people, even down to the people who cook and work in the cafeteria and are preparing meals and working year round and long nights, like all of those people contribute and their families to making these teams successful.
When Shay was in his rookie mini camp, the coach said to the kids when they walked in, he said, "Do you know the name of the guy who just gave you your shoes today?" It was quiet. And he goes, "Do you know the name of the guy that made your lunch or took the garbage out? Do you know any of their names?" And it's really interesting. It really, really had an impact on Shay. And the coach said, everyone from the janitor to the head coach to the GM, we don't succeed without everyone. We are one team. And no one's bigger, no one's smaller. We are one team. And that means the people behind on and off the field. And so Shay had been at UCLA one night, it was really late, and he met the janitor, and he goes, "What's your name?" And the janitor told him his name, and he goes, "Tell me about your life. Like, where did you come from?" This janitor's like, he's so excited, actually, he's having a really good time. And I think Shay had left him some shoes or something, but he said he came home so excited to share the experience of like his new friend, the janitor, that he learned so much about his life and where he came from. And that had the impact on, his coach that coached him during that rookie mini camp. So I think you're correct in that. It's from on and off the field, everything's important.
We could talk forever, as we have on the phone a lot.
Yes.
But thank you,
The
Babette.
Sisterhood.
Yes, for joining me. I mean, I can't say enough about you. Very successful businesswoman in your own right, NFL, wife, mom, daughter-in-law. You just master baker from what I can tell, great daughter, great sister. You wear so many hats. And so, just thank you for becoming a friend over the years and for taking some time today to speak with me on Superwives of the NFL.
Well, I'm just going to end with this. I know we ended, but part 2 will be the whole recruiting situation, because that was that's a book. In other words, I'm an agent and my husband and my sons are like, "Stay in your lane." I'm like, I am in my lane.
You are, like, you have many lanes. It's not just one lane with you, And the other thing we didn't even touch on, because I have a lot of my friends in the news business who watch this, how much the news business has changed over the years and how to navigate that. I mean, we could honestly talk for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, we can, because especially with what's going on in the world today, there's been a lot of interesting, the news business has changed dramatically in the last week. So it's not the last year.
Yes. And the other thing I wanted to point out, we talked about us being rivals to a certain degree. You're a big UCLA person, and for those who don't know, my stepson, Danton Lynn, is now the defensive coordinator at USC. So at one point we were on the same team, and now we're kind of, but it's all love, it's all good.
No, but can I just say this, and I know, and we have to stop, because I know I can keep going, but the thing is, I bleed blue and gold. Like everyone that knows me knows I bleed blue and gold. I am the biggest Bruin you'll ever meet. But we do recognize how incredibly talented he is, and what an impact he's had. And even my husband, who's a broadcaster, as you know, he speaks the truth. I mean, we're really upset that he's not with us, because we want him and we know how incredibly talented he is. But that's what happens in the NFL and the college. You have your favorite teams, you have the people you cheer for, but at the end of the day, you also have to cheer for the people that are in your lives, whether they're your friends' children or in the case of Lee and Shay, a lot of their friends that were drafted, we no longer have favorite teams. We have favorite players, and that's what changes. But yeah, that one was tough because when he was here, I'm like, yes, we have him, and he's so good. He's so talented. And then when he went, it's like anywhere but SC. But then
Right.
he then succeeded over there too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Babette Perry. Babette Perry Pitts. I screwed it up.
I like believe me, it's on my driver's license, Babette Perry Pitts, and sometimes it's Pitts Perry, and everyone's all confused. But as long as they call me like something nice, I'm good.
That's what I say, same thing. All right, it was so good catching up with you.
Yes.
Superwives of the NFL, we know you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us today. And good luck, Babette. You and I will talk soon, as always.
Looking forward to it. You all take
Okay.
care. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for listening, and thanks in advance for liking this podcast and leaving a review. Meet you here next week.